Hey guys, welcome back. Thanks for tuning in today. This is Interrupting Sports Season 2, Episode 8. Guys, this is our final episode of Season 2. You know, we're heading into the holiday season, busy time of year. So this will be our last episode of the season, and then we'll come back fresh and ready in the new year, 2022. With today's episode, it's titled Connecting Perspectives for a Reason. What's happening in this episode is we are going to take all of the knowledge, the insight, the advice provided by the 6 wonderful guests we had this season. And we are going to reshare that for you guys to jog your memory and also provide my takeaways and my perspective so that we can get an overall conclusion of all perspectives provided in this space this season. So that's what's in store for you guys today. So let's dive right in. Alright guys, first let's take a moment and let's look back at who was on our show this season. We started off with my best friend Natalie Thompson, came on the show to represent females, the LGBTQ plus community, as well as hockey players. She's the assistant captain and actually first assistant captain ever that is a goalie for the Ryerson Rams. Congrats to Natalie there, as well as a BIPOC ally. So that was great having her on the show there. Talked about her perspective as a varsity athlete. Then we had my professor, Numan Ashraf, who taught me in Leading Across Differences. Phenomenal course, guys. If you guys are in Rotman Commerce, go take it. RSM 362. Anyways, Numan Ashraf, phenomenal professor, came on to shed light on EDI and leadership, which he is a great expert in. So wonderful having him on the show. Then we had my brother, Justin Lambie, avid sports fan, biggest sports fan I know, also former athlete and BIPOC member. Then we had Samir Batla, who's a sports MBA candidate, my friend, currently Canada basketball intern, as well as a member of the South Asian community. Then we had Elena Hernandez, who is a sports lawyer, works in the U.S. with Wasserman Consulting. She's also a part of the BIPOC community and founder of Wasserman's EDI Council. Then finally, we had Jason Mclante, who's a youth sports coach, coaches his kids in baseball. He's Filipino. He has 20 plus years of experience in sports business from MLSC to the CFL, and had a great time chatting with him as well. Then we had our last Q&A episode where we got to hear from you guys and I got to respond to your critical questions. So a lot of perspectives over the past couple months. Great having everyone on the show. Now let's dive into the main points from each episode. So for the first episode, it was titled Life as a Varsity Athlete, and that was featuring Natalie Thompson. You guys should know before we dive into this that I actually let each guest name the title of the episode. And the reason I do this is because I really believe it's their opportunity to put the main takeaway right on the front of the content. So whatever they feel is this is what I want the message to be, it's right there on the title. So for episode 1, we talked about 3 main things. We talked about the fact that there's a discrepancy between inclusion efforts when it comes to male and female hockey. What we found in particular was that females are a lot more welcoming to the LGBTQ plus community than males when it comes to hockey. And on the other front, we found any sort of race-related inclusion efforts to be predominantly on the male side of hockey. So we found that really interesting because we're seeing inclusion efforts. We're just seeing different forms here. So it was interesting to dive into what does that actually mean and where do we go from here and how do we sort of bridge the gap between the two? Because really when we're talking about inclusion, we're talking about inclusion of all, right? So, discriminating further from there is only digging a deeper hole. We also talked about life being a mental game. This was probably one of my favorite points of that conversation because you get to a point, I think, in life where, for me, it was in undergrad, that you realize your biggest obstacle is your mindset. Anything life throws at you, you can get past it. Because one thing my dad actually told me was, your problems are not unique. And that's something that has stuck with me since he told me. And it's true. You can always find someone in the world that has gone through something at least remarkably similar to what you're going through. And the reason I'm mentioning this is because that tells you that you're able to get past whatever life throws at you. Now, there are things in life you can't control, right? Some people are more fortunate than others. I would consider myself someone who's a lot more fortunate than some of my counterparts. Regardless, you still have demons and battles to face. So understanding that life is a mental game really just means that if you're able to control your thoughts in terms of how you respond to life's events, you are putting yourself in a position to succeed. The last point we talked about was community being everything. That is completely true. Alongside this mental game, it's so much more enjoyable and easier to go at life surrounded by people who you love and who love you. And sometimes you're not born into it. Sometimes you just can't find those people, and that's okay. It just means you're looking in the wrong space. So how do you find those people? Well, you go to do the things that you love to do. If that's sports, then you go and play sports. And guess what? Like-minded people will be around the same area, and you'll be able to find people you can connect with. In episode 2 with Numan Ashraf, we called that Embrace Love, Not Anger. And really, what happened in that conversation is we talked about how there's so much negativity and noise in this space of diversity and inclusion because it comes from a place of pain. And naturally, that results in a feeling of anger. Really, we talked about how it's very difficult for people to get past that anger. And the first step of doing that, Numan says, is embracing love. And I believe he's completely right. Under that notion, we talked about 3 other things. We talked about sports teams and the relationships that sports has to do with diversity and inclusion. In particular, Numan noted the time that he was able to attend both a Leafs game and a Raptors game. And what he really noticed from that is that the Leafs may be from Toronto, but the Raptors are Toronto. And that is when he dived into representation. And he talked about representing the community that you serve. And that stems from a notion of if sports teams are able to represent the community they serve, they'll have success resonating with that community. And so as we move along with D&I efforts, representation matters so that you are able to touch and to reach people. That is why this is so important. He also talked about the athlete's perspective and how athlete activism is very much present, especially, but he talked about something very crucial. He talked about the fact that activism is not charity. And what that means to me is understanding that charity, you're helping those in need by giving back. Activism is not giving back. It's pushing forward. You have to challenge the status quo and push barriers, literally, to get to the point of activism. And finally, we close it off with love. Talked about being more loving. It's very easy to get caught up in the ugly of the world, and it can take you to a very deep, dark space. And mental health, we know, I'm so glad that we're in a time where we're ridding the stigma of talking about mental health issues. I myself have found myself in anxious and depressive states. It's not pretty, but you have to be willing to reach out to the resources and reach within yourself to accept love and to give love, because that is the only way you're going to make it out happy. And at the end of the day, isn't that all what we want? In episode 3, I was joined by my brother to talk about what we called the importance of fans. And really, it was all about fans being the heart of the game. Justin mentioned pro leagues and their efforts doing better to reveal the realities that are faced by minorities. So we talked a lot about the NFL. We talked about the notion of hiring for inclusion and how that should be incentivized by worth and not by appearance. And that's a big one there, not having to hire someone because it ups your quota for your D&I efforts, but rather hiring for merit. And on top of that, bonus, they have diversity to bring to the table, whether that's experience, whether that's age, whether that's race, whether that's sexuality. And finally, we talked about the responsibility that fans have to hold leagues and corporations and organizations accountable for their actions. We are entering 2022. It is going to be a very crucial year. Everybody must keep their eyes peeled because if you go back to many strategic plans, in particular PR statements pertaining to diversity and inclusion efforts and supporting Black Lives Matter and BIPOC community, you'll notice that many things were set to take effect in 2022. So I guess let's see what happens. In episode 4, Become a Difference Maker, I was joined by my friend Samir Batla. And here, his takeaway was you can't be it if you can't see it. All stemming back to representation again. Might sound annoying, might sound repetitive, but that's a good thing because it's the truth. Representation is what matters, and it is a crucial step in the D&I space. He mentioned that sports are crucial to him and very important because they teach you how to succeed on and off the court. Samir's sport is basketball, so for him, his idol was Kobe Bryant, rest in peace, and that played a crucial role for him for not only pushing himself as a ball player, but pushing himself to succeed in the sports industry, in the professional world. I have to agree with him on this because the role that hockey played for me and healthy active living plays for me is really comes from a point of discipline. Discipline and consistency. Those are the two words I would describe that were my major lessons and continue to be my major lessons as an athlete and someone focused on being physically active and being physically healthy because it trains your mind. It really does. And it's as we said, mindset is everything. So if you're able to train and work out the muscles in your mind, why wouldn't you? Another thing we talked about is the position that leagues are in during this cultural movement. We mentioned the fact that leagues have a position to be at the forefront of change. 1, it's because they have the resources. 2, it's because they have the money. 3, it's because they have the power. And with resources, money, and power comes change. For the 5th episode, Education and Giving Back, I was joined by Elena Hernandez, where she talked about the importance of being a resource. And that is helping others and you getting help as well. The first step into doing this, she mentioned, was being a lifelong learner. The second you stop learning is the second you stop growing. That is a quote I read somewhere, probably some book or YouTube video or all of the above, but either way, it stuck with me. So being a lifelong learner, what that means is exposing yourself to things that make you uncomfortable, things that you are not an expert things, and things that you are curious about. And just take it in. Take in the knowledge and everything it has to offer because you will be a better person for it. Then we talked about how getting to this forefront, what we talked about, the forefront of change and the culture movement. We really said it is crucial to have an authentic voice to get there. Authenticity leads change because it's the truth. And like many say, the truth shall set you free. And in this case, that comes from a place of genuinity. And then we ended off with mentioning helping others, and really having people in your corner, your friends, your colleagues, your network, dare I say, Rotman Commerce students, and your family are so important in your story. They shape who you are, and you shape who they are as well. So make sure you lean on people and let people lean on you. The last guest I had on the podcast was in episode 6, A Moment of Truth with Jason Mclante. His key takeaway was be right all the time. Right as in equitably right. So do the right thing all the time. Speak up when it's time to speak up. Stand up when it's time to stand up for others, for yourself. Don't be silent because you've been silent for so long. And look where that's gotten us. He talked about his story as well and how he was mentored and there was a lack of representation, so he couldn't relate to his mentor from an identity perspective. So they really couldn't connect to his Filipino heritage. So he mentioned that a quality mentor brings more than professional experience at the table. And that's that aspect of personal identity that he's talking about. Being able to relate culturally also improves working output, ideation and innovation, creativity. Another reason this is important is because the guidance of mentors, that being done by somebody who is representative of your community, it teaches you, and rather, maybe it unteaches you, that you have a right to be taken seriously. Jason mentioned that when he was presented with decision-making power, he didn't really know if he was being taken seriously. Like, is this a joke? Are you actually listening to me? Or are you making fun of me? Are you making a fool of me? And that's why it's crucial to have mentors and people in your corner and in your network that are representative of your cultural heritage. This is why it's an asset, because it takes that notion out of your head. That, am I good enough? Well, look, you're seeing someone who comes from where you come from doing it. So yes, of course you're good enough. As a coach, he said that he has a role to be this mentor to his children and to the other kids of the team, because he really believed that coaches are mentors because they're the ones who are inspiring the athletes and they are shaping that next generation. They're right there with them. And we mentioned with Samir's episode that what's learned on the court transfers to off the court. So if your coach is inspiring you through sport, that translates into how you go about life. So this is why we really need to focus on authenticity and representation. Now that wraps up the main points from our episodes, but what about my perspective? After conducting these interviews and really listening to each individual story, upbringing, experiences through life, and their insights, I've gathered a few that I'd like to share with you. The first is be a risk taker. If there's anything that I've learned, is that doing nothing gets you nowhere, because you've done nothing. People have a fear of failure, and I'm definitely not exempt to that. But I know that the fear that exceeds failing is the fear of being in the exact same place tomorrow. And the only way to change that is by taking a risk, whatever it is in life. So I invite you and I support you in taking that risk, whatever it is. The second thing is lead with your heart. Lead with your heart means trust who you are. I believe we have these things called natural instincts, or some people call them gut feelings, where you just instinctively know the difference between right and wrong. Think of it as your moral compass. Let that guide you and don't be afraid of it. You're allowed to question others in terms of behaviors, thoughts, even perspectives. Entertain them and hear what they have to say, but trust who you are as well. As a sports fan, I also have to say, cheer on your teams. Be a supportive fan and be an inclusive one as well. From an overall perspective, I'd say be the person today that you are striving to be tomorrow. If there's one thing you took away from anything that was said, it's that. I have a board in my room that lets me change the letters so I can write whatever I want on it. It was actually a birthday gift from Natalie and my other friend Riley. And right now it says, compete against yourself. The reason I have that on there is a reminder that every day I'm striving to be that person today that I am looking to become tomorrow. Because if I don't make those moves today, if I'm not a risk taker, if I'm not leading with my heart, if I'm not cheering on everybody I know, then I will not become that person. And you will not as well. And so that is my overall takeaway for you guys and my final perspective on connecting the various perspectives we had this season. Thank you guys so much for supporting the podcast. It means the most to me, and I hope that you were able to take away something from each episode. This wraps up our season 2. We'll be coming back fresh in the new year with some more guests. So definitely stay tuned there and share the podcast with everyone you know, because that is how we grow. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts if you like. And of course, hit us up on social at Interrupting Sports whenever you need. Take care of yourselves. Good luck to those in the exam season. And have a wonderful holiday season. See you next episode.